So when you come to a story like David and Goliath or any biblical narrative, the three levels that you're dealing with are the textual level, the covenantal. If you're fancy, you say covenantal, right? So the covenantal level. And then the canonical level. Now, I used to call this the historical level, but the problem with that is it's more biblical to say covenantal. And also it might imply that, this isn't as historical or something like that. But these are the three levels that it's working at all the time. So what is the textual level? Well, simply put, you probably figured this out intuitively. The textual level is what? It is what is in front of you in that text, in all of its details, again, going way beyond anything that you would do or include in, say, one teaching session or a sermon or whatever. It is all the observations you can make about that text. Now, you don't want to overdo it, right? So it's not like every verse you read. One of the things you're looking for are prominent things, right? So, in the text we're going to look at today, David and Goliath, which you've read, I'm not going to read the whole thing again. In the text we're going to look at today, there just happens to be a whole lot of characters, which is not true of every narrative, right? But there's a lot of characters. So one of the things I'm going to do up here that's going to be actually a little bit different is I'm going to be more general up here for the sake of a lecture, right? So we can keep moving. When you're doing this for your assignment, you're going to be a little bit more specific, and I'll fill that in. But the textual level is simply this. At the textual level, you're not already thinking, what are my 3 points going to be here? You're not thinking, how am I going to preach Jesus from this text, right? Those are good things to think, but that's not your sort of business here. What you're doing here is thinking, you're looking and thinking, okay, who are the major characters? Where are we? Like, actually, literally in that text. Not so much, not yet, sort of how did we get here? We'll look at that at the covenantal level. And then prominent things that are said, right? Because even though this is going to today be loaded up with characters, there's going to be other texts, like 2 Samuel 7 is often a text that I assign for this class. There's not as many characters in 2 Samuel 7. You'll focus more on specific things that are said. Okay, but I can talk about that more. So we're looking at the textual level. Let's just begin, and some of this, if not all of it, is going to seem, why are we even taking the time to do this? Of course, we all know this. But humor me. What's going on at the textual level here? Let's name some characters. The first character that's probably going to come to mind is, there you go, David, right? Anything said about David in the text? You can generalize, and we're not going to. I'm not going to add sort of verse numbers and all kinds of things because that'll slow us down too much. But you would want to do that. Anything particular said, or just you can paraphrase observations about David from this text. Hey, there you see, you guys already know how to do this by the magic power of reading. He is young. What else you got? Son of Jesse. That's good. What else? Yeah, shepherd. It sort of sounds like it's all of a sudden Pentecostal in here. I heard shepherd in the midst of all of it. I must have the gift of hearing. All right. What else? He's from Bethlehem. Oh, by the way, and don't take this personally. One of the things you'll want to do is not worry about whether or not this is going to maybe be significant later. Right? So again, remember, this is not just a utilitarian practice. It's not just pragmatics, and that is, I'm doing this so I can do something else, namely make a sermon. Right? We're just talking about how to interpret or analyze the text just because it's there and God gave it to us, apart from what we're going to do with it. Okay, so he's from Bethlehem.
Do we include things we know from previous chapters?
Not yet. Well, it depends on how far back you go. Because one of the things is these levels are not sort of hermetically sealed off one from the other, right? There's a lot of sort of fluidity. In other words, sometimes things are going to straddle, and it's hard to tell. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's just that there'll be some background. Like, did you think of something specific? Not yet. We'll save that one. That's really important to put up here. Okay? But we'll get to that for certain. What else? Anything else with David?
The younger brother.
Yeah, he's the youngest. Anything else? He's handsome. Okay. Nobody wanted to use the old word? Yeah. Ruddy. All these years, I still don't exactly know what that means. My mom tried to explain it to me once, and my wife did too, but I can't get it. So, I understand all the details of Revelation better than I understand the word ruddy. So, anyway, now, these are anything else? Can you tell me anything about his character? What he's like? Yeah, he's brave. Now, can you think of any specific things that he says that tell you that? You get what you ask for. Everybody just told me everything at once. So, one at a time.
Kills bears.
Yeah, he kills lions and tigers and bears. Yeah, thank you. You have no idea. I use that all the time in here, and a lot of times it's just crickets afterwards, right? Because, you don't want to do something like completely outside the pale, like watch Wizard of Oz or something like that, right? I mean, you're Christians after all. And so, all right. So he's killed lions. I'm just going to put lions because we know what that means. Anything else that tells you something about David and who he is? It can be things he says. I'm giving you a huge hint. Yeah. That's really important, right? That's an extremely important observation, and that is David is offended by Goliath and these Philistines. What does he say? He calls him something really important. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should do what? Defy the armies of the living God. That is maybe the statement that is made in this text, right? Now again, I'm going to shorthand that, and I'm not going to attach a whole bunch of verse numbers and things for the sake of time, but you would 100% do that, add the verse and sort of the quote, right, in sort of real life experience. But he is, where do we put it? He is concerned for, I'm going to put God and the nation, right? Because when he says, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Right? That's his sort of covenantal faithfulness. God and the nation. Now, we can come back and add some things. That's fine, but let's just move on. Let's not do Goliath yet. Who else you got? Saul. I'm gonna run into a huge problem up here. I can already feel it. Okay, I might have to cheat. So Saul. Now, what can you tell me about Saul, either from observations of reading the story or specific things that are said about him or that he says? Okay, he's older than David. What else? He's the king. Yeah, there you go. Now see, that'd be easy to overlook, but obviously it turns out to be extremely important for this text. He's the king. What else you got? He's big. Now how do you know that?
His armor.
Oh yeah, okay. I didn't think that's the answer you're going to give me. I thought you were going to talk about something like back when he was first chosen. Yeah, you know that because, well, either that or David's just small.
I was sort of thinking about
I thought, okay. I wonder if we get, this is like a counseling session. What'd you really mean by that? I mean, I know you can't have meant what you actually said, right? I'm going to drop that right there. No commentary. But we will come back to that. What else? Yeah. He doubts David. Now, one of the things to do while you're reading narrative is not just immediately side with David in this whole story. This is a really important point. Our tendency is, immediately when we read this, is think, I'm like David. You know what I would do? If I was faced with an entire army of giants, with the giantest of the giants in front of me, I would run right out to him with some rocks too. That's what I would do. That's how we think, right? You wouldn't have. I wouldn't have either, right? I mean, I might have gone out and made some smart aleck comments at him from a distance, but I wouldn't have just run up to him. But we do have a tendency, a bad tendency, to read stories and forget that everybody in that story is there for us to learn something from, right? And you learn things, the things we learn are not just positive things, right? It's a positive thing to learn sort of negative characteristics. So one of the things to do, because what you want to do when you read a story is what you do when you read any story that you're interested in. That is, you kind of enter into it, right? One of the, I don't like to use this word too much because it gets misused. One of the arts to reading a biblical narrative is to learn how to kind of inhabit that story, how to personally plug into it as though you were there by seeing common human characteristics in all the characters, or in many of them. So one of the things we don't want to do is immediately. Now I'm not arguing for Saul or saying, well, he just couldn't help it. That's not what I'm saying. At the same time, though, don't be too quick to be like, yeah, that's me right there. But I wouldn't have any of these characteristics. Well, I mean, I wouldn't have had, I guess I get that one. But doubts, and then the big thing, right? So, yeah, real quick.
Well, going back to David, one of the things you might be able to add is that he was faithful, because ultimately he said that
Yeah.
the Lord, he treated Vickers like a lion.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's a great point. The idea being that it's clear David over against, and basically in contrast to everybody else, is faithful.
But then, in a sense, Saul responded to that in letting him go.
Well, maybe.
Well, it says that
I don't know.
the Lord be with
Yeah, I know. But I'm just suggesting, and this might reflect me, I think that's Saul's way of saying, nice knowing you. I don't really take that as like, Okay. Yeah. Well, you are. He does say, "The Lord be with you," but I honestly, because of the character of the story, that is, David's brothers are like, because you see this whole interesting, not maybe essential, dynamic between younger brother and older brothers, right? You can just see it because he comes like, I don't know, he's got like a bag of ham sandwiches, and right. Obviously it can't be ham. That's the point, right? It's just a joke, right? And they didn't probably have sandwiches, but that I said ham because anyway. So anyhow, so he comes in immediately like, "What are you doing here?" It just sounds like older brothers talking to younger brothers, and then he's great. He's like, "What I do now? Right? I just brought you some sandwiches. What's your problem?" And so you see that whole thing, but then David trying on the armor. It's just what happens over the course of the story is a couple of things. One is we have this. You have an understanding of David that nobody else at that time had. That is, for instance, that he's killed, like he says it, but you know the backstory. Not everybody there that day does. And you, as a reader, this is a great thing about having the Bible. As a reader, you are simultaneously getting more story than anybody at the time had. And if you put that on the larger context, you're getting more story than even like Samuel had at the time. right? I know he's not here. He's around it. More than David had, more than anybody had as readers. But yeah, so I do think one of the things, David's just unlikely, right? Because we typically have looked at David as sort of like, be a David, except for that end bit, right? Right? We conveniently leave that out. One of the things that we do is we forget David is the most unlikely character in this story. And we kind of miss that sometimes. That's not a criticism of what we do, but we sort of can miss that of all the characters in this story, the most unlikely character of all is David. And it's not just because he's got 5 rocks and a slingshot. It's because it's David. He's a kid, right? And even with the lions and tigers and bears and stuff, still, he is not a hero at the outset. Not your typical hero, right? So another way to think about it is this. You're Saul that day, and you're thinking, man, I'm in a tight spot. What am I going to do? You know what we're going to do? I'm going to go find some shepherd kid to take care of this for me. Right? Now, if you can honestly tell me that's what you would have done, then I would love to have a conversation with you later about all kinds of things. But you wouldn't. And that's an important part of the story that is kind of part of the subtext, if you will, of the story, and that is David is not the likely hero here. If you think about it at the level of the story, and it's sort of a spoiler alert, that's going to be an important connection to the rest of the story of the Bible. How this story connects to other parts of the Bible is through this very thing, and that is what Paul calls the wisdom of God that confounds the wisdom of the world. But we don't want to be so sort of pedestrian and familiar with these stories that we miss important points like that. Okay? So, that was a long aside. So Saul, what else? It doesn't have to be exhaustive for what we're doing in here, right? We don't have to do the whole entire thing. But anything else?
He's afraid.
Yeah, that's really important. He's afraid. That turns out to be a really important aspect of the story in contrast with things like bravery and faith, and is going to be a direct connection up to this covenantal level. Okay? Well, we can always fill this in. Who else? Real quick. David's brothers. What about them? Okay. How do you know there's 8 total? Right. Yes, exactly. Now, I'm going to put that up here, and then we might end up sort of connecting that, we might not, because remember, I'm glad you mentioned that. Storytellers don't always have a hidden agenda to everything they add to their story. You see what I mean? Even in the Bible, it's not as though every sort of thing there is direct. I mean, sometimes, like what do storytellers do to make it a good story is they give you sort of facts and figures and details about things that you're not actually meant to use for like greater things. It's just so you understand the story. It's a better story. It's a better story to fill in a lot of details, but that doesn't mean, so what am I going to do with 8 here? It's in the Bible. What else you got in the Bible that's 8? That's a weird one. Right? So in other words, so I'm really glad, but I'm going to put it up here because you never know. You never know, right, what you're going to find. So there's 8 altogether. I mean, you could say something like 7 is perfect. That's not perfect. But that would just be completely fabricated, right, and useless. I wish I hadn't said it just now because it was not true, for the record. Not true. What else? Anything? Just anything. Yeah, they are soldiers. They're in the army. Just put it that way, because I definitely can spell the word army. Soldiers, right? I don't know. Yeah, they're all irritated at him. Yeah. Oh, wait, now we got 8 over 3. There's got to be something in Revelation about that. Right? And if there's not, I can find it. There's 3 of them there. All right, that's maybe enough. What's next? Don't say Goliath yet. Yeah, Israel. Now, you could probably sum this up pretty quickly. What would you say? Yeah, they are. And for good reason. I was astonished when I went to this site how close they really were to each other. It is, I don't know why, I always imagine them like some battlefield like from Braveheart or something. Like they're like way, way, way apart or something like that. But they're not. They are really, it's close quarters there. This is not a gigantic valley. And you could have seen, like, you could make out like features of people. They're really close. And this is a terrifying situation. I mean, terrifying. And it is ongoing. I mean, by the time David, what's that? 40 days, right? 40 days of terror. Now this is just something I'll say. I'm not necessarily going to use this. I'm just thinking about the story. Think of the tension and anxiety that is building just humanly after 40 days of this. Right? That's an easy way to sort of step into the story. So they are, I'm just going to put this, they're afraid. Yep. No. Because they're just messing with them, I think. I mean, Goliath, it's like Achilles versus Boagrius eventually. Right? Thank you. And so eventually, I think they're just there. I don't know why they're there for that long, but I don't think it's because they're afraid. They're not afraid of anybody, I think. I mean, there could be some historical thing, right? But they've...
High ground is a thing.
Yeah, because they have it, right? They're on the high ground. They've got control of the whole thing. I think they're just waiting for the moment. I don't know. I mean, I suppose I would want to think through it if I had. I won't right now, but back to some prior experiences. Is there something like in their collective memory about things like the problem with the ark and all that? I doubt it. Right, where the ark, they're like, get this thing out of here, right? Because it keeps coming. Put it on this cart. Get it out. I don't know. So, but I think here, though, it's just they're in charge. They can do what they want. They can stay there 40 years if they want. And Israel can't do anything about it. Okay? So yeah, the Philistines. Now, the Philistines, they are the enemy, right? They're the antagonist in the story, if you will. And then Goliath is sort of the epitome of that. Now, there's something important, though. We'll get to this. In fact, let's just go ahead and sneak up above. What's the huge problem here? There's a gigantic, massive biblical problem. They should not be there. Why? Yes, they should have been defeated ages ago. Ages. So it's not just, hey, that's pretty, what are those giants? Where did they come from? The biblical question is, why are they still there? Because they should not be there. Israel, right? The fathers have sinned and the children's teeth have been set on edge in this story. You know that phrase from the Bible? That is, the children of Israel, the children's children of the sort of conquest sort of generation are paying the price for their father's sins. Because they should have been defeated a long time ago. So that's a little thing, right? So this is going to be sort of up here in the covenantal level, right? I don't even know what to put. I'm just going to put this because I'm not. They shouldn't be here. That's a big part of the story. And see, just thinking about the story in that way already plugs it into a bigger biblical context other than the Philistines are the bad guys, Israelites are the good guys, or at least David is. So this is a huge part of the story. All right, now worst for last. Goliath. Just, what do you got? Yeah, he's a giant. He's fully armored. Uh-oh. Yeah, he's got a big, huge staff. Spear. I'm just going to put weapons. Yeah, he is full on all the time a warrior. Yeah, he's from Gad. He is obviously proud. Uh-oh, no R. He's proud, and what else? Maybe a synonym. Yeah, he's proud and arrogant. And I'll add this. Well, he's also confident. And rightly so, right? If I had been Goliath that day, I would have said 3 times more than he said. I would have come out like 8 times a day just to talk trash, right? And even gotten even closer to them, because that's what I would have done. And so he comes out and he's talking junk every single day. And what does that do to you, sort of your psyche? Yeah. It's not like if you're Israelite, if that guy comes out one more time, I've had it. Right? I'll give him one more day. There probably was somebody, right? Just as an aside, I have no doubt that there's some guy in the Israelite army who's like, if he comes out tomorrow, that's it. I'm telling you, I'm only going to take this one more time. And then the next day he's like, I'm telling you, I'll give him one more chance, right? There was some guy there who was boasting about all the things he is never, ever going to do, probably. But over time, right, this is going to be wearing them down. Now, again, before I wrap this part up, and we'll keep referring to it, remember, I've done this pretty quickly, and one of the things that is missing here that when you do your assignment, you do not want to miss, and that is you want to fill in more textual detail in terms of verses and what's said, okay? It's just there's a ton of characters here, and I've been summarizing a lot, but you want to be more specific than this when you're actually doing it. Yes?
Would you want to put somebody who should be there but isn't mentioned? I was thinking
I'm interested.
Jonathan.
Now, I'm not going to put it up here, but I do want to ask questions exactly. Like the question was, what about people why are they not there, right? Now, on one level, you might think, well, they're just not there. Well, they're there in other places. And so that's exactly the sort of question, because I think we should ask every question we can think of and then think of some more. And so I'm not going to put it up here, but you would want to, once you sort of register that question, you think, well, I'm going to look into it. Because remember, finding out, coming to a dead end is coming to a conclusion. We don't think of, but we usually think of conclusions only being like, here's the payoff from knowing this. Finding out that something you're thinking about and sort of seeking out comes to nothing, that is an important conclusion. Sometimes, actually, in the field of, or in the area of exegesis, finding out what's not being said is virtually as important as finding out what is being said. So, just because you might think, well, I don't know, is not a reason not to pursue it. Okay, so this is the textual level. And again, we can fill this in some more, but what we'll do now is consider how to tie it together to this next layer of context. Okay?